Blessings, everyone. Welcome back to Witches of the Moon. I'm your Friday hostess, Natalie. This week's topic is witchcraft and children. Now, this is a topic that we have discussed in prior seasons, but I was not participating in the discussion that season, so this will be a new perspective, at the very least, to the same topic. It seems to be a topic that is very popular, a lot of people had questions about, and it is one that was recommended by our viewers, which is why we decided to go ahead and cover it again for this season. And I apologize that the lighting in here is kind of weird. I'm in front of a window, and even though I have a blind, the sun kind of fades in and out. It is a little past noon here right now. That clock is correct. It's a little bit past noon here, so the sun's kind of up and it's a little bit of an overcast day, so I apologize if the light fades in and out and I look kind of funky for a while. But I wanted to go ahead and just discuss a little bit of my personal views and how I see children in witchcraft. Now, my children are older, so for them it's not a secret. They know what my practice is. They know that I'm involved. My youngest is 17. And so she has mixed views on it. She kind of thinks it's silly, but at the same time, she's one of those kids that's kind of on the fringe, likes all the screamo music, and kind of thinks it's cool when it's convenient for her. She likes to tell people what my religion is, even though I've asked her not to discuss it with her friends, because, you know, I know how parents are, and sometimes parents are not so willing to accept. Her best friend, who's been her best friend since kindergarten, her mom is aware that I am a witch, and she's actually bought me several books and things for my birthday and stuff. In fact, she's the one that gave me this delightful mug that I get so much popular commentation about. So it's, for her, it's not so much. But let me talk a little bit about my views of any religion. And for the purposes of this video, before anybody has a canary fit over, or a coronary over, whether or not witchcraft is a religion. To me, it's not up for debate. To me, it's a religion. If you don't see it as a religion, fine. For you, it's not a religion. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to reference it as a religion, and I'm going to consider a religion your way of life. Whether it be specific things that you believe, specific spiritual practices that you engage in, your religion is the manner and way in which you live your life. And to me, that makes witchcraft a religion, because if you are truly practicing witchcraft, it pervades every aspect of your life. It's in everything you do. You are a witch, and you can't separate the two. So, for that, using that as the definition of witchcraft as a religion, I want to discuss that. Now, to me, this is like any other practice that you do, any other thing that you engage in, any other religion that you engage in or follow or whatever. When it comes to children, children are going to observe the way you live your life, and they're going to see those things, and they're going to understand, and they're going to learn from it. They may not always agree with it. They may like certain aspects of it and not like other aspects of it, but they're going to live it. If you are a parent and this is your way of life, I think that it's your, I don't want to say your duty, but your responsibility to teach children why you live your life the way you do. So if you are a practitioner of the craft, it is a big part of who you are if you're truly practicing. And therefore, I think you owe it to your children, if they have questions, to answer them succinctly and honestly and without any hem-hawing. Now, there are certain aspects of the craft which may not be child appropriate per se. And of course, it's up to the discretion of the parent to decide at what level their child is in terms of their understanding. And that goes with any religion. I mean, there are certain things in the Bible that, as a Christian, when I was practicing the way I was raised, I didn't discuss with my children in explicit detail. I mean, there's adultery in the Bible. There's stonings and murder in the Bible. There's explicit sexual activity that's mentioned in the Bible that were things I did not feel comfortable discussing with my children when they were little. If they had questions, I told them, this is something that I'm not certain you're ready to fully understand right now, and I will do my best to explain it to you when you are in a better place to understand it. Or I would try to explain it in a way that was simple enough that they could understand it without having too many more nosy little questions. about things they didn't really need to know. You know, things like, well, it just relates to how this man and this woman got along, and I just kind of let it go, or how these two men got along, and I just kind of let it go. I didn't really go into in-depth detail about that. And of course, when you're talking to a child about sex magic or even forms of malediction, it's up to you to decide if you feel like your child is at a place where they can, one, understand it developmentally, but two, make sense of it, three, absorb it and categorize it appropriately. It's not something that I would encourage you to put a young child into in terms of, like, sex magic obviously is not appropriate for a small child. You can discuss the relationship between the god and goddess and the practices that are noted at Beltane and things like that in a way that is child easy to understand. You might even try to find family-friendly Beltane activities. I know a lot of times there's a bonfire and there's maypole dancing, and kids don't necessarily need to know where the maypole came from or its full meaning. They just know it's a fun little dance to do. And often you see children engaged in that kind of activity, and that's okay, and that puts it at a level that's easy for them to understand, where they can feel like they are participating with you in something that's important in your life. You don't have to show them anything explicit or give an explicit, long, detailed description of what's going on. You can talk about how the god and goddess are like a mommy and daddy and they love each other, and like a mommy and daddy, they have a family, and this is how this comes about. So it really kind of depends on the level of understanding of your child and so forth. I don't feel that it does your child a service to hide your practice from your child. If it's something that's important to you, then it's not anything that's wrong or bad. So that, and I think it's important that children understand that, because there's so many misconceptions about witchcraft in the world, and witchcraft has gotten such a black eye since the advent of Judaism and Christianity and now Islam, that I think it's important to properly educate children about what witchcraft truly is, why it's not evil, and why we choose to engage in it, because otherwise you're leaving your child's education up to people who may not really understand it themselves. They're going off of what they've been taught witchcraft is or what it means. They're going off a biblical description of what witchcraft is and what it means, and they're not really understanding the practice as you do. When you educate your child about why you engage in witchcraft, and why it's important to you, why it's a part of who you are guarding your child against misconceptions and misinformation, and putting them in a position not only to defend you per se, but to defend your way of life and possibly their way of life. Now, I'm not one that believes in forcing your religious views on your children or your practice on your children, for those of you that do not feel it as a religion. Again, my definition of religion for the purposes of this video is your way of life. The core beliefs that you adhere to and carry out in your day-to-day life, that is your religion. So anyhow, if you do not educate your child, then they're going to take the negative information that they hear, and without having any other way to identify it, they may begin to see that what you're doing is bad or evil or shameful, especially because we do tend to do our practice within some level of secrecy. And again, I think it's important to explain to your child that the reason that you keep it private is because it's between you and your god and goddess, or also because people don't fully understand it, and we tend to fear what we don't understand. And I think that that makes something very easy for even a very small child to understand. As they get older, you can start teaching them more of the intricate aspects and more of the detailed information. By the time they're teenagers, they're pretty much old enough and mature enough to understand every aspect of it. And the thing about that is, if you carry this through with your children and you explain it on a level that is age appropriate, by the time they are a teenager and you're ready to have the talk with your kids, you can discuss the importance of the great rite with your kids and help them to understand that it's not something that's to be thrown around lightly, that this is something that you engage in because it is a part of your human existence. And again, as I talked about in previous discussions when we did our video last season or season 3 on sex magic, and I said that to deny your children their sexuality is very unfair to your child. It's one of the things about Christianity that I think makes Christianity so difficult to really live by, because we are human beings. We are sexual creatures. That's why all of us are here. None of us would be here if it was not for the fact that we are sexual beings. And to tell your children that they can't be sexual beings or make it shameful or dirty does a great disservice to your children. Now, it is a topic that needs to be discussed with respect, and engaging in risky sexual behaviors can be very dangerous for your health. And I think it's important to explain it to your children that way by the time that they are, old enough to understand it. And some kids mature faster than others, so you don't want to have this discussion with a 7-year-old because they're not going to even understand what you're saying. And I'm going to give a good example of this. There's a book called Too Sexy, Too Soon. And basically this book was about the sexualization of children due to various perceptions of the media and so on and so forth. There was a little boy who was going to be expelled from school or suspended from school. He was like a first grader, I think, maybe a first or second grader, because he told this little girl at school that he wanted to have sex with her. And fortunately, they happened to have an excellent counselor at the school who said, children do not have an adult understanding of some of the terminology that they hear. They don't really understand what that means, so let's ask him what he thinks that means before we go jump into conclusions about anything. And essentially what this little boy wanted to do was give the girl a kiss on the cheek, because he thought that kissing somebody was having sex with them. So again, you cannot apply an adult understanding to a child's knowledge about a certain situation. So making certain that you're putting things on a level that your child can understand, that you're explaining the rituals, why we do these things, what they represent, explaining why this is such an important part of your life, maybe putting an emphasis on the connection with nature and with the oneness of the universe and human beings might be a better aspect to emphasize in the younger years, and then as they grow older, go into some of the more detailed things about crafting and, spellcraft and that kind of thing. I think when you take any topic of discussion and you treat your children with respect, and you don't try to hide things from them, but you put them at a level that's equal to their understanding, and you can actually get a lot of good knowledge about, well, what if I don't know where my child's understanding is? If you look into some of the other books that were geared towards Christianity and that kind of thing, discussing some of those things, you might find some good information on child development. You can also look into child development books. Reading that particular one I just mentioned, Too Sexy, Too Soon, that's an excellent one. There's a very good book about raising your children in the Christian faith that talks about what's appropriate and at what age, because the people that wrote it happen to be a couple, and the wife has a degree in child development, so she's coming from that background. But it's called Parenting with Grace. And what is the author's name? One moment, I have another book by him. Yes, Gregory Popcak. Gregory and Lisa Popcak, and it's Popcak. That book I found very useful when dealing with my children in terms of just implementing discipline and so forth. You can apply the principles in that book to anything that you want to raise your children with, whether it's religious or non-religious. So it was because, again, Lisa Popcak has a background in child development, and so she understands where their mental understanding is when they wrote that book, and it was very well done. So that might be something to consider. But I think that anytime you try to hide something from your children, one, they know you're hiding something, and two, children know when you're BSing them, when you're not giving them the full story. But if you approach it with respect and tell them, look, there are some things to mommy or daddy's practice that you're just not really ready to understand yet, and as you mature or as you get older, we will be discussing these things. You're not passing them off, and you're not telling them that they will never understand it. You're letting them know that they're just not ready now. And if you can take that same topic and approach it in a manner that's age appropriate, I think that that's the best way to approach anything with children, because they want to be respected as human beings, just like you and I do. And I think so often children have so many questions about what they see that they may or may not fully understand, and they want to understand. And if this is an important part of your life, it's very important that you do approach this with your children and discuss it with them. Sit them down and talk to them about it. Answer any questions that they have as honestly as you can, appropriately at the time. And I do feel that that's extremely important, because it's going to improve your bond with your child. It's going to improve their understanding and gird them up against any misunderstanding or misinformation that may be out there, and put them in a position to better defend them, so that they don't feel like perhaps their mom and dad is doing something that's not acceptable or is wrong. And it allows them to go out and educate others correctly. But if you don't approach that with your kids, I think that you're setting yourself up for a negative backlash later on as they get older, because they're going to feel like there's something that you're doing that's behind their back or secret or not safe. There are many different resources for children in the craft. If you look at Llewellyn's, they have several books that have been written by various different authors about children and the craft. I know that they have a new witches coloring book coming out. I think that that's probably going to be geared more towards the new craze of adult coloring books, but it might be something that you can sit down with your child, maybe get them a little coloring book, maybe even a Halloween coloring book that you can find somewhere. Have your coloring book, sit down with your child and color and say, let's talk about some of the things that you see on here. Do you have any questions about any of this? Or, you know, look at that. You're coloring your witch green. Am I green? Do I look green to you? I'm not green. Why would you think that a witch is green? And it opens up the discussion at a level that's appropriate for your child. So I think that parenting is a tough job. And I think that the craft is not something that should be hidden away from your children if you're really fully immersed in it and it's truly who you are. Because it's a part of who you are, and your kids have a right to know all of you. Maybe not all at once. I hope that this discussion has been informative to you. I would love to hear feedback, especially if you have kids. I'd love to know some of the things that you do to share your craft with your children. I'm very open with mine. Again, mine are older, so any questions they have, they can ask themselves. But I'm very quick to correct information that I hear on some of these silly shows, like a haunting, you know, oh, she was wicked and she opened a portal for a demon and that kind of thing. And I love those opportunities. I take them as teachable moments, and I hope that you will continue to do so too. Thank you for watching, and blessed be.